Chapter 1. The Forgotten Hero. The Galactic Union Embassy on Virelia Prime stood as a beacon of unity amidst the chaos of a fractured galaxy. Its crystalline spires pierced the pale blue sky, shimmering like ethereal sentinels. The interior was just as majestic, with vast halls illuminated by soft, ambient light reflecting off transparent walls. Alien diplomats from dozens of species glided through its expansive corridors, their voices blending into a harmonious symphony of interstellar languages. For many, the embassy symbolized hope, a fragile truce forged after decades of bloody conflict. For Talira Valen, the embassy was more than a political hub, it was the site of a deeply personal mission. Talira, a diplomat from the Valerian Empire, walked through the bustling atrium with measured steps. Her silvery skin shimmered faintly under the refracted light, and her flowing ceremonial robes, adorned with intricate geometric patterns, shifted hues as she moved. While she maintained an air of grace and composure, her heart raced with anticipation. Today could be the day she fulfilled the promise she had made to herself 10 years ago, the day she found the human soldier who had saved her life. A memory that never faded. Talira's earliest memories were of her homeworld, Valerian Prime, a place of boundless beauty and serenity. Its lush forests and crystalline lakes had been her playground as a child, a sanctuary untouched by war. But the Dominion's expansionist hunger had shattered that peace. The Dominion raid on Valerian Prime had been swift and brutal. Talira, barely 10 years old, had hidden with her family in the ruins of a crumbling temple as Dominion forces advanced through their village. She could still remember the heat of the fires, the deafening explosions, and the terrified cries of her people. And then, in the midst of the chaos, he appeared. The human soldier had been unlike anyone she had ever seen. Clad in battle-worn armor, his face streaked with soot and determination, he had stood between her and the approaching Dominion forces. His plasma rifle had roared with deadly precision, cutting through the enemy with unrelenting ferocity. When it was over, and the Dominion soldiers lay defeated, he had turned to her, his expression softening as he knelt to her level. "You're safe now," he had said, his voice calm and steady. She had never learned his name, but his face was etched into her memory. Over the years, that memory had been a source of both comfort and inspiration. It had driven her to pursue a career in diplomacy, believing that if one man could stand against the tide of war, then perhaps peace was possible. A glimmer of hope. Talira's search for the soldier had been fraught with challenges. The chaos of the Dominion Wars had left many records incomplete or destroyed, and the human military archives were frustratingly vague. But she had persisted, following every lead, however tenuous. Her efforts had finally borne fruit when her assistant, Crix, uncovered a name: Jonas Reed. The Galactic Union's database confirmed that Reed was a decorated soldier who had served in the Dominion Wars. His service record aligned with the events of the Valerian raid, making him the most likely candidate. Crix, a small insectoid with iridescent carapace and quick, darting movements, hurried to keep up with Talira's long strides. "Ambassador, I've confirmed it," he said, handing her a datapad. "Jonas Reed is attending today's security summit as a consultant. He's here, on Virelia Prime." Talira's breath caught as she scanned the datapad. It contained a photograph of Reed, his face older and more weathered than she remembered, but unmistakably him. She felt a surge of emotion relief, excitement, and a touch of nervousness. "Where is the summit being held?" she asked. Crix hesitated. "The West Wing. It's a secured area. Your diplomatic credentials won't grant you access." Talira's jaw tightened. She had spent years searching for this man. She wouldn't let bureaucratic red tape stop her now. "Then I'll find another way," she said firmly. The encounter. Gaining access to the summit required a combination of cunning and determination. Talira used her position as a Valerian ambassador to request an audience with the summit organizers, citing her interest in Valerian human relations. While her explanation raised a few eyebrows, it was convincing enough to grant her temporary clearance. As she stepped into the secured wing of the embassy, her heart pounded in her chest. The conference room was a hive of activity, with military officers, analysts, and advisors engaged in heated discussions. Holographic displays projected maps and data streams, their glowing blue light casting sharp shadows across the room. And there he was, Jonas Reed stood at the far end of the room, his broad shoulders and rugged features making him impossible to miss. He wore a simple utility jacket over his uniform, blending in with the other attendees. His dark hair was streaked with gray, and his sharp eyes scanned the room with the precision of a man who had seen too much. Talira approached slowly, her nerves threatening to get the better of her. When she was only a few steps away, Jonas turned, his eyes meeting hers. "Jonas Reed," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within her. He frowned slightly, as though searching his memory. "That's me. And you are?" Talira took a deep breath. "My name is Talira Valen. I'm from the Valerian Empire. 10 years ago, during the Dominion raid on Valerian Prime, you saved my life." Jonas's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Valerian Prime. I remember. You were just a kid." Talira nodded, her voice trembling. "I've spent years trying to find you. I wanted to thank you for everything." Jonas studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, "You don't have to thank me. I was just doing my job." "No," Talira said firmly. "You went above and beyond. You risked your life for someone you didn't even know. That's not just a job, it's heroism." Jonas shifted uncomfortably, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm no hero, Ambassador. I'm just a soldier who got lucky." Talira smiled faintly. "You may see it that way, but to me, you're a symbol of hope. And I think the galaxy needs more people like you." A new mission. Their conversation was interrupted by a summons to return to the summit proceedings. Jonas excused himself, leaving Talira with a mix of satisfaction and longing. She had found her hero, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were destined to intertwine further. As she returned to her quarters, Crix chirped excitedly. "You found him?" "Yes," Talira said softly, her silvery eyes glowing with determination. "But I don't think this is the end. Something tells me our story is just beginning." Chapter 2. A New Threat. The Galactic Union Embassy bustled with life as day transitioned into night. Delegates and soldiers moved through its corridors, their conversations laced with tension as rumors of a Dominion resurgence spread like wildfire. But for Talira Valen, the chaos around her was a faint hum. Her thoughts remained fixed on Jonas Reed, the soldier who had once saved her life. Her reunion with him had been brief, and though it had brought a sense of closure to her years of searching, it had also stirred something deeper questions about what came next. Jonas was no longer the man who had charged into the heart of a Dominion raid without hesitation. Time had weathered him, and the galaxy's conflicts had left their scars. Yet, there was still a spark in him, a resolve that Talira could not ignore. Her musings were interrupted by the soft chime of her comm device. Crix's voice crackled through the line. "Ambassador, you're needed in the war room immediately. It's urgent." Talira's heart quickened. "What's happened?" "There's been an attack," Crix replied. "And Jonas Reed is requesting your presence." The war room. The war room was a stark contrast to the rest of the embassy. Its dim lighting and holographic displays gave it an atmosphere of constant readiness. Talira entered to find Jonas standing at the center of the room, his sharp eyes fixed on a glowing projection of a star system. Around him, officers and advisors murmured in hushed tones. "Talira," Jonas said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "We've got a problem." She stepped closer, her gaze shifting to the hologram. It displayed Elira 7, a Valerian colony on the fringe of Dominion space. Red markers indicated recent activity. Dominion ships had been detected near the colony. "What's going on?" Talira asked. Jonas gestured to the map. Elira 7 has been quiet for years, but now the Dominion's scouting it. Intel suggests they're looking for something ancient. Talira's heart sank. "A relic?" Jonas nodded grimly. "If they find it, they'll use it as a weapon." Crix, who had followed her into the room, chirped nervously. Elira 7 is a small colony. Its defenses are minimal. If the Dominion attacks, the colony won't stand a chance. Talira turned to Jonas. "What's the plan?" He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "We need to evacuate the colony and secure the relic before the Dominion gets their hands on it. But we're going to need a ship and a crew willing to go into enemy territory." "An unlikely alliance." As the group discussed logistics, Jonas leaned closer to Talira. This isn't going to be easy. The Dominion won't back off without a fight. I'm not afraid of them, Talira said, her voice firm. These are my people, Jonas. I won't abandon them. Jonas studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's get to work. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Jonas used his connections to requisition a small but fast ship, the Endurance, capable of slipping through Dominion patrols. Talira, meanwhile, contacted Valerian officials, rallying a team of volunteers to aid in the mission. By the time the Endurance was ready to depart, a small but determined crew had assembled. Among them were Crix, ever loyal despite his nerves, and a handful of Valerian soldiers. Jonas took command, his experience and tactical mind making him a natural leader. The journey to Elira 7. The Endurance's journey to Elira 7 was tense but uneventful. As the ship glided through hyperspace, Talira found herself drawn to the cockpit, where Jonas was reviewing maps and intel. Can't sleep? He asked without looking up. Not with what's ahead, she admitted, taking a seat beside him. Do you think we'll make it in time? Jonas sighed. If the Dominion's only sending scouts, we might have a chance. But if they've already found the relic. He didn't finish the sentence, but Talira understood the implication. The Dominion's interest in Valerian relics had only grown in recent years, and their obsession with ancient technology was a threat to the entire galaxy. She hesitated before speaking. Jonas, why did you agree to this? You've already done so much. You don't owe my people anything. Jonas finally looked at her, his expression serious. Because it's the right thing to do. And because I made a promise to you, and to myself. No one should have to face what you went through on Valerian Prime. Talira felt a surge of gratitude, but before she could respond, the ship's alarms blared. The Dominion's arrival. The Endurance dropped out of hyperspace near Elira 7, its sensors immediately detecting Dominion ships in orbit. A small fleet of frigates and troop carriers loomed over the colony, their weapons aimed at the surface. Jonas swore under his breath. We're too late. Talira's stomach churned as she looked at the scene. What do we do now? Jonas's mind raced. We adapt. The Dominion doesn't know we're here yet. If we can disable their command ship, we might be able to buy the colony enough time to evacuate. He turned to Crix. Get me a layout of that frigate. I need to know where its engines and weapons systems are. As Crix scrambled to comply, Talira placed a hand on Jonas's arm. I'm coming with you. He shook his head. No, it's too dangerous. I'm not asking for your permission, she said firmly. These are my people. If you're risking your life for them, then so am I. Jonas hesitated, then relented. All right, but stay close. Boarding the enemy. Under the cover of the Endurance's stealth systems, Jonas and Talira led a small team onto the Dominion frigate. The air was tense as they moved through its corridors, their steps silent but deliberate. Every shadow felt like a threat, every sound a potential ambush. They reached the engine room without incident, but as Jonas prepared to plant explosives, the ship's alarms suddenly blared. They know we're here, he muttered, his jaw tightening. Get ready for a fight. Dominion soldiers poured into the room, their plasma rifles blazing. Jonas and the team returned fire, the confined space erupting into chaos. Talira stayed close to Jonas, her heart pounding as she fired her weapon. Despite the odds, they managed to disable the frigate's engines and weapons, leaving it vulnerable to an attack from the Endurance. But as they made their escape, Talira couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. A narrow victory. Back on the Endurance, the crew watched as the Dominion frigate drifted helplessly, its systems offline. The remaining Dominion ships retreated, unwilling to risk further losses. Elira 7 was safer now. But as the Endurance set course for the colony, Jonas and Talira knew the fight was far from over. The Dominion wouldn't give up so easily, and the relics were too valuable to leave unguarded. As the Endurance's engines hummed softly, Talira turned to Jonas. What happens now? Jonas stared out at the stars, his expression resolute. We find the rest of the relics. And we stop the Dominion no matter what it takes. Chapter 3. The Dominion's Escalation. The Endurance orbited Elira 7 under a blanket of tension. Below, the colony's evacuation was underway, the ground buzzing with activity as civilians boarded transport shuttles destined for safety. Smoke from Dominion attacks still lingered in the air, mingling with the chaos of frantic preparations. On the surface, the colonial governor barked orders to the remaining defenders, while children clung to parents who promised they'd be safe. Inside the Endurance's command room, Jonas Reed and Talira Valen stood over a holographic projection of the colony. The map displayed critical areas under Dominion threat and, marked in glowing blue, the presumed location of the Valerian relic beneath an ancient temple. "They'll regroup and return," Jonas said, his voice calm but resolute. "And when they do, it won't just be scouts. They'll bring their full force." Talira nodded, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. "Then we have to move now. The relic can't stay here, it's too dangerous." Jonas glanced at her. "You know more about these relics than you've told me, don't you?" Talira hesitated, the weight of centuries of secrets pressing against her mind. "The relics are more than artifacts," she admitted. "My ancestors called them keys of the eclipse. Individually, they are powerful, capable of manipulating energy and matter, but together, they unlock something far greater." Jonas raised an eyebrow. "Unlock what?" Talira met his gaze, her silvery eyes filled with apprehension. "The Eclipse Gate. It's said to be an ancient constructed doorway to a dimension of infinite energy. Or destruction. The texts aren't clear, but one thing is certain. It was never meant to be opened." Jonas let out a long breath, his jaw tightening. "And the Dominion wants to play God with it. Perfect." Talira's voice softened. "That's why we can't let them have the relic. If they find all the keys, we don't know what they'll unleash." Jonas stared at the hologram for a moment, then turned to her. "All right, we secure the relic. But if it's as dangerous as you say, we need a plan to keep it out of anyone's hands, including ours." Talira nodded, her resolve firm. "Agreed. Let's move." The Hidden Vault. The ancient Valerian temple, perched on the outskirts of the colony, stood as a silent witness to centuries of history. Its weathered stone facade was adorned with faded carvings of celestial patterns, depicting the Valerian ancestors' reverence for the stars. Overgrown vines clung to its walls, and the air inside was heavy with the scent of damp earth and old secrets. Jonas, Talira, and a small team of Valerian soldiers descended into the temple's depths, guided by maps retrieved from the colonial archives. The passages were narrow and winding, their surfaces etched with symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of their lanterns. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Calith, a young Valerian soldier clutching his rifle tightly. "It's meant to," Talira said, her voice echoing softly. "The temple was built to protect the relic, not to welcome visitors." As they moved deeper, the air grew colder, and the faint hum of energy became more pronounced. Finally, they reached a sealed chamber, its massive stone door inscribed with intricate geometric patterns. At its center was a circular indentation, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. "This is it," Talira whispered, stepping forward. Jonas raised an eyebrow. "How do we open it?" Talira reached into her satchel and pulled out a small crystal shard, its surface shimmering with the same blue light as the door. "This shard is attuned to the relic. It should act as the key." She pressed the shard into the indentation, and the patterns on the door began to shift and align. With a deep rumble, the door slid open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. The relic revealed. The chamber was unlike anything Jonas had ever seen. Its walls were covered in glowing runes that pulsed rhythmically, and at its center floated the relic, a crystalline sphere, radiating a soft, ethereal light. The energy emanating from it was almost tangible, filling the air with a sense of awe and unease. Talira approached the relic slowly, her movements reverent. "This is the Shard of Continuum," she said softly. "It holds the power to bend time and space." Jonas's eyes narrowed. "And the Dominion wants to use it as a weapon." Talira nodded. "If they combine this shard with others, they could create a weapon capable of tearing entire star systems apart or worse." Jonas stepped closer, his instincts on high alert. "Then let's secure it and get the hell out of here." As he reached for the relic, a deafening explosion rocked the chamber. Dust and debris rained down as the team scrambled for cover. The sound of boots echoed through the passage behind them, accompanied by the sharp bark of Dominion commands. "They're here," Calith shouted, raising his weapon. A desperate fight. Dominion soldiers poured into the chamber, their black armor glinting in the relic's light. Plasma bolts lit up the air as Jonas and the Valerian team returned fire, their shouts blending with the chaos. "Talira, get that relic secured," Jonas barked, taking down a soldier with a well-placed shot. Talira worked quickly, activating a containment field around the relic. The sphere dimmed slightly as the field enveloped it, stabilizing its energy. But the Dominion's numbers were overwhelming, and their reinforcements kept coming. "We're outnumbered," Calith shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "Hold the line," Jonas snapped. "We just need to buy a few more minutes." Talira finished securing the relic and turned to Jonas. "It's ready. We need to get it to the ship." Jonas nodded, his mind racing. "Fall back. Cover each other." The escape. The team retreated through the temple's passages, the Dominion forces hot on their heels. Jonas led the way, his rifle blazing as he took out pursuers with precise shots. Talira stayed close behind, clutching the containment field tightly. As they emerged into the open air, the Endurance swooped down, its engines roaring. The ship's side hatch opened, and Crix waved them aboard, his small frame trembling with fear and determination. "Get in, get in," Crix shouted. Jonas and the others scrambled aboard as plasma fire rained down around them. The hatch sealed, and the Endurance lifted off, its engine straining as it climbed into the sky. "Punch it, Crix," Jonas yelled, collapsing into a seat. The ship shot into orbit, narrowly evading Dominion interceptors as it made the jump to hyperspace. A new resolve. In the safety of the Endurance's cargo hold, Talira placed the relic in a reinforced containment chamber. Its glow was subdued, but its presence still filled the room with a sense of weight and power. Jonas approached her, his expression serious. "We can't keep doing this. The Dominion's not going to stop, and we can't keep running." Talira looked at him, her resolve unwavering. "Then we fight. We find the other relics before they do, and we figure out how to stop them for good." Jonas nodded. "All right, but if we're doing this, we're going to need help." Talira smiled faintly. "Then let's find it. Together." As the Endurance sped through hyperspace, its crew united by a common purpose, Jonas and Talira prepared for the battles yet to come. The Dominion's pursuit was relentless, but so was their determination to protect the galaxy from a power that should never be unleashed. Chapter 4. The Relic War. The Endurance emerged from hyperspace into the uncharted system of Thalessa Reach, its engines humming steadily. Outside, a vast nebula of swirling blues and violets stretched as far as the eye could see, obscuring the stars and cloaking their movements. Within the ship, tension hung thick in the air. They had the Shard of Continuum, but its retrieval had come at a cost. The Dominion now knew exactly what they were after. Jonas Reed sat in the cockpit, his sharp gaze fixed on the displays. His mind churned with plans and contingencies. He had seen firsthand the devastation the Dominion could bring, and now they had their sights set on a power far greater than he had ever imagined. In the cargo hold, Talira Valance stood before the containment chamber housing the relic. The crystalline sphere pulsed faintly, casting an eerie light across her silvery skin. Despite the chamber's stabilizing field, she could still feel the relic's energy, its whispers brushing against her mind like a distant echo. "This is just the beginning," she murmured. Unwelcome news. The ship's comm system crackled to life, Crix's nervous voice cutting through the silence. "Ambassador Valen, Captain Reed, you're going to want to hear this." Jonas and Talira exchanged a glance before heading to the bridge. When they arrived, Crix gestured toward the central display. A Dominion fleet was massing on the edge of Valerian space, their formation unmistakable. "They're preparing for an assault," Crix said, his antennae twitching anxiously. "It's bigger than anything we've seen before." Talira's stomach twisted. "They're coming for the other relics." Jonas crossed his arms, his expression grim. "And they're not wasting any time." The display shifted, highlighting key Valerian systems likely to house relics. Ancient ruins, hidden vaults, forgotten temples, all potential targets. The Dominion wasn't just searching, they were preparing to overwhelm. Talira clenched her fists. "If they get their hands on even one more relic, we won't be able to stop them." Jonas turned to her, his voice steady but firm. "Then we need allies. The Valerian Empire can't fight this alone. Talira hesitated. Many in the Union see this as our problem. They won't risk open war with the Dominion. Jonas's eyes narrowed. Then we'll make them see the truth. If the Dominion unlocks the Eclipse Gate, no one will be safe. A fragile alliance. The crew of the Endurance set course for Thalessa Station, a hidden hub of Galactic Union activity deep within the nebula. The station was a melting pot of species, from towering Scythian warriors to diminutive Revalian engineers. It was also a place where secrets were traded as easily as currency. As the Endurance docked, Jonas and Talira descended into the station's bustling market. Their goal was clear: secure support from the Union's leaders, or at least from factions willing to fight. Their first stop was Commander Rylus, a Scythian tactician known for her unflinching resolve. Jonas laid out the situation, describing the Dominion's plans and the stakes of the Relic War. Rylus listened intently, her 4 eyes narrowing as she absorbed the information. "If what you're saying is true," Rylus said, her deep voice resonating, "then this isn't just a Valerian issue. It's a threat to all life." "It is," Talira agreed. "But we can't stop them without your help." Rylus stood, towering over them. "I'll bring this to the Union Council, but don't expect them to act quickly. Politics move slower than war." Jonas nodded. "Then we'll fight without them if we have to." A Dominion ambush. As they returned to the Endurance, alarms blared across the Thalessa Station. The Dominion had tracked them, and a small fleet of warships had emerged from the nebula. Panic spread through the station as Dominion soldiers began boarding in search of the relic. "We have to move," Jonas shouted, ushering Talira and the crew back to the ship. The Endurance launched amid chaos, weaving through the station's defenses as Dominion ships opened fire. Jonas took the helm, his hands steady on the controls as he navigated the treacherous nebula. "Crix, get me a path out of here," Jonas barked. "I'm trying," Crix replied, his voice tinged with panic. "The nebula's interfering with our sensors." In the cargo hold, Talira stood beside the relic, her hand resting on the containment chamber. The shard's energy pulsed stronger now, as if responding to the danger. She could feel its whispers growing louder, urging her to act. Unleashing the relic. As a Dominion cruiser closed in, its weapons locking onto the Endurance, Talira made a decision. She deactivated the containment field, and the relic's energy surged through the ship. The lights flickered, and the air seemed to hum with power. "What are you doing?" Jonas yelled over the comm. Talira's voice was calm but resolute. "Trust me." The relic's energy flowed into the ship's systems, amplifying its engines and weapons. Jonas felt the controls come alive under his hands, responding with a precision and speed he had never experienced. The Endurance's weapons fired, tearing through the Dominion cruiser with devastating force. As the enemy ships regrouped, the Endurance surged forward, its engines propelled by the relic's power. It slipped through the Dominion's blockade and disappeared into the nebula. A new mission. When the Endurance finally emerged into open space, the crew was exhausted but alive. The relic's energy had faded, returning to a faint glow within its chamber. Jonas found Talira in the cargo hold, her expression weary but determined. "You took a hell of a risk back there." "I had to," she said simply. "The relic isn't just a weapon, it's a tool, and we're going to need it." Jonas leaned against the wall, his gaze fixed on the crystalline sphere. "If we're going to win this, we need to understand what we're dealing with. That means finding the other relics before the Dominion does." Talira nodded. "And figuring out how to stop the Eclipse Gate permanently." Jonas straightened, his resolve hardening. "Then we don't stop. Not until this is over." As the Endurance charted its next course, the crew prepared for the battles ahead. The Relic War had begun, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance.